Steam curled slowly from the paper cup in Daniel Harper's hands as he sat alone at the small, metal table outside the cafe. The morning air carried that quiet stillness that comes right before a city wakes up. Cars hummed past on the street. People hurried along the sidewalk with their headphones and coffee, but Daniel barely noticed any of it. His eyes were fixed on the empty chair across from him. That chair used to belong to someone else. For the past 3 years, mornings had been quiet like this. Too quiet. Ever since his wife, Emily, passed away after a sudden illness, silence had become Daniel's most familiar companion. Raising his 6-year-old son, Lucas, alone had changed everything about his life. Every decision, every dollar, every moment revolved around making sure Lucas felt safe and loved. But sometimes, when Lucas was at school and Daniel had a rare hour to himself before work, the loneliness crept in like a cold wind. He took a slow sip of tea and stared down the street, lost in his thoughts. That was when he heard the whisper. "Mister, please pretend you're our father." Daniel blinked, thinking he had imagined it. He turned his head. 3 little girls stood just a few feet away from his table. They looked almost identical. Same dark curly hair, same wide brown eyes, same pink jackets that were slightly too big for their small frames. Triplets, he realized immediately. They couldn't have been older than 7. The girl in the middle stepped forward nervously. "Please," she whispered again. Daniel set his cup down slowly. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "What did you say?" The 3 girls exchanged a quick glance, like they were silently voting on who should talk. Finally, the smallest one spoke, her voice trembling. "Pretend you're our dad. Just for a minute." Daniel's heart skipped. "Why would I need to do that?" he asked, confused. Before the girls could answer, a loud voice echoed down the sidewalk. "Girls!" The word cracked like thunder. Daniel looked up. A tall man in a wrinkled gray jacket was marching toward them from the corner of the street. His face was tight with anger, and his eyes scanned the sidewalk like a hawk hunting prey. The triplets froze. One of them grabbed Daniel's sleeve. "Please," she whispered urgently. "He thinks we ran away from him." Daniel felt a strange tightening in his chest. "Did you?" he asked quietly. The girl shook her head quickly. "He's not our dad." The man was getting closer now. "Girls!" he shouted again. "You think you can just run off like that?" People walking by began glancing over. Daniel's mind raced. He had no idea what the truth was. He didn't know these children. Maybe they were lying. Maybe they really had run away from their father. But then he looked at their faces. Fear. Not the kind of fear kids show when they're about to get scolded. The deeper kind. The kind that comes from not feeling safe. Something inside Daniel moved before logic had time to catch up. He stood up and gently placed a hand on one of the girls' shoulders. "There you are," he said warmly, loud enough for the approaching man to hear. "I've been looking everywhere for you 3. The girls looked up at him in surprise, but they quickly understood. "Sorry, Dad," one of them said softly. The man stopped a few feet away, his eyes narrowing. Daniel forced a calm smile. "Morning," he said. The man stared at him. "You their father?" Daniel nodded casually. "Yeah, they wandered off while I was ordering tea." The man looked at the girls. They huddled closer to Daniel. The smallest one held onto his jacket like it was the only thing keeping her upright. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, the man shrugged. "Kids these days," he muttered. "Always running around." Then he turned and walked away. Daniel watched him disappear down the street. Only when he was completely gone did the girls slowly release their grip on his arms. One of them let out a shaky breath. "Thank you." Daniel sat back down, still processing what had just happened. "Okay," he said gently. "Now maybe you can tell me what's going on." The triplets exchanged another glance. Then the girl in the middle spoke. "Our real dad died last year." Daniel felt a quiet ache in his chest. "We were living with our aunt," she continued. "But she couldn't take care of us anymore. So social services sent us to stay with that man." "The one who just left?" Daniel asked. The girls nodded. "He's supposed to be our foster guardian," one said. "But he's mean," another added quickly. "He yells all the time," the smallest whispered. "And he said if we cause trouble, he'll send us somewhere worse." Daniel rubbed his forehead slowly. "What are your names?" he asked. I'm Mia, said the girl in the middle. I'm Lily, said the one on the right. And I'm Sophie. Daniel looked at them carefully. 3 scared kids. 3 small humans trying to survive in a world that had already taken too much from them. He thought about Lucas. What if something happened to him? What if Lucas ever felt this alone? The thought made his chest tighten. Where are you supposed to be right now? Daniel asked. At the apartment, Mia said. But we went to the park. And he followed us, Lily added. Daniel nodded slowly. 1,000 thoughts rushed through his mind. He wasn't a hero. He was just a tired single dad trying to keep his own life together. But sometimes life didn't ask if you were ready. Sometimes it simply placed a moment in front of you and waited to see who you would choose to be. Daniel looked at the girls again. You hungry? He asked. Their eyes lit up instantly. 20 minutes later, the 4 of them sat inside the cafe sharing pancakes and scrambled eggs. For the first time since sitting down that morning, Daniel heard laughter. Real laughter. Sophie giggled when syrup dripped onto her sleeve. Lily told him about how they once switched places at school and confused their teacher. Mia spoke the least, but her eyes stayed carefully on Daniel, like she was trying to decide if he was someone she could trust. Eventually, Daniel checked his phone. He sighed. I have to pick up my son from school soon, he said. You have a son? Sophie asked. Yeah, Daniel said with a smile. Lucas, he's 6. Is he nice? Lily asked. He's the nicest kid I know. Mia hesitated before speaking again. Are you going to tell someone about us? Daniel leaned back in his chair. Yes, he said gently. But not in a way that will get you in trouble. The girls looked nervous again. Listen, Daniel said softly. There are people whose job is to make sure kids are safe. If that man isn't treating you right, someone needs to know. The triplets stayed quiet. Finally, Mia nodded slowly. Okay. Later that afternoon, Daniel made a phone call to Child Services. The process wasn't quick. There were questions, paperwork, follow-ups. But something surprising happened during those weeks. The girls kept asking about Lucas. Lucas kept asking about the girls. Soon they were all meeting at the park together. Lucas loved having 3 new friends who laughed at his silly jokes. Daniel watched them one afternoon as they ran through the playground together. 4 small figures chasing each other across the grass. For the first time in years, the quiet inside Daniel's life didn't feel so heavy. Months passed. Investigations confirmed the girls' situation wasn't safe. They needed a new foster placement. One evening, a social worker sat across from Daniel in his living room. Mr. Harper, she said gently, I know this is a big question. Daniel felt his heart start pounding. But would you consider fostering the triplets? The room went silent. Lucas looked up from the floor. Dad, that means Mia, Lily, and Sophie could live here? Daniel looked at his son. Then he thought about that morning at the cafe. 3 frightened voices whispering a desperate request. Pretend you're our father. He smiled softly. Yeah, he said. Lucas grinned. The social worker waited. Daniel took a slow breath. Yeah, he repeated. I think we can make room. A year later, the house was never quiet anymore. There were backpacks by the door, drawings on the fridge, laughter echoing down the hallway, 4 kids running through the living room. And every morning, Daniel still sat with his tea. But now there were always 4 small chairs around the table. Sometimes the biggest changes in life don't arrive with warnings. Sometimes they begin with a whisper. Pretend you're our father. And sometimes, if kindness answers that whisper, pretending turns into something real. Give me title, description, hashtags, keywords, realted that story.